Mathew Dickerson, Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council. How are you today?
I'm very good, thanks. Always good to be chatting to you and the broader region around Dubbo.
Let's talk about some real positive news for Dubbo and, Western New South Wales, and it's Australia's first renewable energy zone, and some big announcements there.
Yeah, so you're right. Wellington and the Wellington area here, which encompasses a fairly large area as well. It goes out as far as Gilgandra, but it's really focused around Wellington at the moment, is the first renewable energy zone that got up and going from the state government. And that meant that businesses had some interest and some direction there, confidence, if you like, in actually putting in some renewable energy components. So we've already seen 33 wind turbines going there. We've seen a couple of solar farms that have been put in. And of course, one of the things that people are concerned about with renewables is if the wind's not blowing, you've got no electricity. Or at night time, when the sun's not shining, you've got no electricity. So really what seems to be integral to me is to have that mix of power sources. Obviously, wind and solar and batteries are an important part of that mix, or some way of storing that power as well. So we actually had a presentation on our committee meetings last week, our standing committee meetings, from a company that's about to put in a battery in there, a company called Ampyr, A-M-P-Y-R. Now, the really interesting part about that is that that company is actually backed by Shell. Now, Shell, we obviously traditionally think of associated with oil and non-renewable products. So it's actually interesting to see that they see the writing on the wall. So they've started to diversify their energy mix. And there's a few different oil companies doing exactly the same, because one of the other projects in the Wellington area is a huge solar farm, and that's backed by BP. And what I find even more interesting is BP and Shell will be doing a deal. So you don't normally see those two doing deals together. But when there's excess solar from the solar farm, they'll be feeding that power across to this battery. And when then the solar farm needs some excess power that they've put in there, they'll be selling it from Shell back across to BP. So these two huge oil companies, normally arch competitors, will be working together to help deliver renewable energy in this particular zone. This zone, Rod, when it gets finished, and we're talking about not that far away, a couple of years we're talking about, with the solar farms and the wind turbines there, will power about 1.35 million homes in this state. Now, we've only got 3 million homes in this state, so it gives you an idea of just this one little zone, how many people will be powered from this particular area. So quite incredible.
Absolutely. It's good news, that one. And with an investment or investments like that in the local area, how's it going to shape up for things like housing and jobs for everyone? Well,
that's two interesting parts there. Jobs will be fantastic, and one of the things we've been stressing to these companies is that we don't want to just see a huge influx during construction and then everyone leaves again. And that's a risk with any of these huge projects. For example, the company that gave us a presentation about the battery said there'll be up to 100 jobs for up to, say, 18 months. So that sounds fantastic. 100 jobs injected into Wellington will be a huge boost for that economy. I imagine they'll be fairly well-paying jobs, and they have said that they'll try and source wherever they can that talent from local areas. So people from the entire region will have the opportunity to be working on those jobs. So it might be, for example, people from Coonamble or Walgett or Burke or wherever it might be might come and live in Wellington for a week at a time and then go back home on weekends. So there'll be great opportunity there. But then when the construction job finishes, for a lot of these projects, batteries, solar panels, wind turbines, they don't require a huge number of people. Now, that's great. From our perspective as bill payers, you don't have a huge cost in running these particular facilities. But when we want a bit of an injection into the economy, you find that a lot of these particular options have maybe one or two extra employees. So it's not a huge boost to the economy. They do actually have community benefit funds where they'll have some money they put aside to go to the community every year. It might be $50,000 or $100,000. So again, a bit of an injection, and that's used to do community-based projects. But we've also stressed to these companies that what we want to see from a council perspective is these companies have actually the option of having employees that aren't specifically associated with that project, but other employees in the company. We've all learned that we can work away from home now, Rod. So rather than work at home in Sydney and have an office in Sydney, we've said, why don't you have some of your employees come and live in Wellington or Dubbo or anywhere in the region, because surely it's going to be better living in this region than in the smog-filled, congested Sydney. So we're trying to work out some ways we can get long-term, ongoing economic benefits. If we're going to be powering 1.35 million homes across the state, we should get some benefit out of that.
And on the issue of housing, to cater for this?
So that's another issue again. Housing is a problem in Dubbo and Wellington at the moment. We just don't have enough houses for the people that want to live here. We get excited because all these people want to live in Dubbo, but unfortunately what sometimes happens is we just don't have enough housing. So we're addressing that in a number of different ways. There's a few things we're working on internally in Dubbo in terms of the release of more land, making sure our zoning's right, even encouraging people to use that huge backyard they've got, because you can have dual occupancy or build what people would call a granny flat in the old days. So have better utilisation of that land. We'll also see some medium density buildings come on. Might be small apartments, flats, townhouses, that type of thing. But the other thing we talk to some of these companies about is if they want to bring in lots of accommodation for short-term accommodation, the mining camp type thing, we don't really want to see mining camps spring up and then disappear and leave no benefit. So we've talked to these companies and we've said, if you want to do something like a mining camp, and we want a bit better quality mining camp, but if you want to do something like that, do something where you've got to put the infrastructure in the ground for a new area. So, for example, your water, your sewer, your electricity, your NBN, all those components in the ground. If you need to put things like dongers on there, then build the infrastructure underground at the cost of the developer, obviously. Build all that underground, put your dongers in, but then once they're moved, those blocks are then ready to be developed and sold to the general public. So get some benefit long term. So we're certainly working with these companies to make sure we've got that accommodation there for people, because people are going to keep moving out here. People are getting smarter and smarter in Sydney, Rod, and they're realising that regional locations are a much better place to live.
Yes, certainly, and also maybe some jobs with more mining in the Dubbo Regional Council area.
Well, Toongai mine, we've heard some talk about Toongai for a period of time now, and they're talking about a lot of the rare earth metals, rare earth minerals that are used in some of these renewable and battery products going forward. So you're talking about zirconium, hafnium, some of these products that are used by lots of different companies around the world for all of this new age technology. And at the moment, China is a major supplier of a lot of these products. So Toongai mine, it used to be owned by Alkane, but it's now been split off, called Australian Strategic Minerals, ASM. So that is a really exciting project. And what's really exciting about that, I've just talked before about some of those renewables where you don't have a lot of employment going forward on an ongoing basis. But the Toongai mine, once that goes ahead, it'll have a huge number of people in construction. But after construction, it'll employ at least 250 people ongoing, because most of the work for that mine is not in the mining process, it's in the processing. So in other words, they're going to do a great job in making the end product, rather than what we're really good at in Australia. We seem to dig up stuff, send it overseas, and someone actually gets the value add process. But what ASM is attempting to do is to dig it up here, but also process it here. So there'll probably be 200 people or more employed just in that processing facility to try and get as close as possible to that end product. So that's really exciting. I think much smarter from an Australian point of view, but also fantastic from our point of view. So that will be, I would suggest, at least 250 people ongoing, but probably more than that because of the whole operation there. And that's something that they're talking about a long term. We're talking about decades of mine life out of that. So that's a really exciting project at Toongai.
We're speaking with the Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council, Mathew Dickerson, and you're forming some consultative committees for the community.
Yeah, for some strange reason, Rod, the last council didn't like the idea of many consultative committees. So a lot of the committees that used to be in place were disbanded, and a lot of people who are volunteers, after all, were a bit frustrated that their voice was no longer being heard on council. So we need to rectify that. So we went through a process at our standing committees last week, and we put forward 16 different consultative committees. And the idea of those is they're focused on different parts of the community, and we'll put out expressions of interest and we'll invite people to join these committees. And obviously, if you've got an interest in that particular area, then we want you to join. So, for example, we've got a committee that will focus on our swimming pool. So logically, if you're a swimming club, if you're the president of a swimming club, or you're someone that trains regularly, we want those type of people on that committee to give us their expertise and then feed that through to council. These committees don't make decisions as such. They are consultative. They're designed to consult the community and then feed their recommendations through to council. Ultimately, councillors have to make the final decision on anything that happens with council, but we really want to hear from the community and hear that feedback. So 16 committees have been proposed. That will formally go to council next week to be resolved to, yes, these are the committees we want to put forward. They'll then go out to the community for some public comment, and then that'll come back to council once we hear from the community. Have we missed a committee, for example? Is the makeup of that committee wrong? Whatever people think is important about those various committees. And then once that all comes back, we'll form those committees, invite people along to them, and then we can start getting that direct feedback from the community. Really important, I believe, Rod, because there's only 10 councillors. We've got a huge area to cover. And as much as we all might be out in the community and hearing from the community, there's never too much feedback you can get as a councillor or as a council to make sure we get the right decisions.
All right. And you've got your community strategic plans out?
Absolutely right. 2040 Community Strategic Plan, talking about consulting with the community. That's out at the moment. There'll be a range of workshops and public forums and online forums held for that. And really what we want from this is, here's the plan, here's the vision we have at the moment for what Dubbo, what Wellington, what the region will look like in the year 2040. And it's a bit of a dreaming document to say, here's what we think it should look like. But we can only get there if we can start planning for there. And as the old saying goes, a failure to plan is a plan to failure. So that's exactly what we're doing here. We're talking about getting to the point where we have a plan in place. Now, it'll change over the years, over the next 18 years. It'll change as time goes on. But ultimately, what we want to do is be able to say, here's where we look like we're going. Here's the vision we've got going forward. And we can chip away at that. We can have grand plans in there, but as we get opportunities with grants or opportunities pop up, we can keep planning towards that final resolution. Again, it's out there at the moment for comment from the public.
And just quickly, the Westview Drive-In is set to leave Dubbo?
Yeah, look, that's a great shame. That's a private business owned by one individual, and I've certainly had discussions with that individual. I actually set up at one stage there a bit of a deal with one of the developers that's developing the land out there, and they were doing a deal where they would move the screen for that particular proprietor, and we talked about different land, and basically I said to the owner of that business, if you want somewhere else in Dubbo to go and we can find some land for you, we're happy to do some sort of long-term lease so you've got a home to go to. But ultimately, he's got a business and he's going to make a decision about where he locates that business is going to be the best outcome for that business owner. It's been great to see the drive-in revived. I remember when I was a kid going to the drive-in, it was fantastic. It was a big exciting time. We had the old station wagon and you'd turn it around and the kids would lay down in the back and watch the movie there. So I have fond memories of that, and I've been out to the drive-in several times since it's been reopened. So I think it's a great community project. But again, as with anything council's involved with, we can encourage, we can set up parameters that will work for people, but businesses will make their own decisions about what they do. And in this case, the owner of that business decided to go out of town, and good luck to him, but a bit of a shame for Dubbo.
Absolutely. Mathew Dickerson, I thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Always good to chat.